To the talk today on International Forest Day. I brought a little tree with me so everyone feels more comfortable, including me. I'm a little nervous, but not too bad because I heard you're such a nice group. And I have been used to talking to children, but not a big group of adults. I won't read every slide, but the first two I'm going to, because I think the first two slides are quite important. The first one is a quote by Dr. Ching Lee, and I'll introduce him later and his significance in the history of forest bathing. We are part of the natural world. Our rhythms are the rhythms of nature. As we walk slowly through the forest, seeing, listening, smelling, tasting, and touching, we bring our rhythms into step with nature. Shinrin-yoku is like a bridge. By opening our senses, it bridges the gap between us and the natural world. And when we are in harmony with the natural world, we can begin to heal. Our nervous system can reset itself, can rest itself. Our bodies and minds can get back to how they ought to be. No longer out of kilter with nature, but once again in tune with it. We are refreshed and restored. We may not travel very far on our forest walk, but in connecting us with nature, Shinrin-yoku takes us all the way home to our true selves. And we're going to start with the land recognition, which I do have to read because you probably know Centre Wellington passed a new land recognition last year, and it's longer but more appropriate. The lands we know today as the township of Centre Wellington have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands or traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the township of Centre Wellington, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages along the Credit River and in the Grand River Valley. These Indigenous nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the township remains home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations. So first, for the definition, and people have asked me this over the last couple of years, and it's been hard to write down, because it's one of those things, if you don't experience it, it's kind of hard to explain it to people. But this is the best I've come from. First of all, there's no washing involved, okay? In essence, forest bathing is a slow walk and immersion in the atmosphere of the forest. A guide uses crafted invitations and will help you to open your awareness, enabling you to tune into and connect to the energy, healing power, and innate wisdom of the earth. A guided forest bathing experience recalibrates the body and mind to a feeling of peace and well-being and can be used as a preventative and restorative practice. So two of the leading researchers in forest bathing are based in Japan, Dr. Ching Lee, professor of forest medicine and immunology at the Nippon Medical School. And he was the first scientist to start studying the effects, the health benefits of forest bathing in the late 1980s, and is still continuing to research now. And they have both written a book. Dr. Yoshifumi Miyazaki is a professor specializing in nature therapy research, and he is at Chiba University, a Center for Environment, Health, and Field Sciences, and he's been studying researching since 1990. Ching Lee basically wrote the book on forest bathing. Although they both have the books, he is like the #1 researcher in the world over the last few decades. And I have both of these books at the back, at the end, if you want to have a flick through them. They're beautifully presented books. They're really nicely done. And Dr. Miyazaki, in the bottom right, sorry, that's okay. He has been researching on Yakushima Island, which is an island I will tell you a little bit more about later in the speech. So, what is forest bathing? Shinrin-yoku is literally Japanese translation into English. Shinrin is forest, yoku is bathing. And you're bathing in the healing atmosphere of the forest. The trees emit essential oils into the air to protect them from fungus and bacteria and disease. And that is why it is called forest bathing. I'm going to go into detail about the essential oils a little bit later when the science comes up. It came and developed in the 1980s in Japan after their rapid urbanization and industrialization. came along with all sorts of stress-related illnesses. And you've probably heard of the death by overwork, which karoshi, which was a Japanese term for people just working too much and dying from the stress of work. And a few scientists thought, well, what if? It was a very nature-based society anyway, through Buddhism and Shintoism traditionally. And they thought, well, people are not spending much time in nature in the urban environments. They're working too hard. What if we see what happens if they do spend more time in nature? And that's what motivated all the research to start. In Buddhism, all natural objects have a kami, a spirit, in their beliefs. And then trees that reach 100 years old have a special spirit called the kodama. And then trees 100 years or older, you have to ask special permission from the tree spirit before they are cut down, or it could cause all sorts of problems in the Shinto tradition. The characters for Shinrin Yoku, the Japanese characters, Shinrin is made of two characters, and one is woods and one is forest. And I think that was intentionally done, because part of the philosophy is it can be done anywhere. You don't need to be in the wilderness. You can be in the parking lot with the tree. You can be at home during COVID with your houseplant. You can watch a nature video. So the emphasis is it's a thing, something. We are part of nature, and nature is all around us. You don't need to go to a special place to do it, although the benefits will probably obviously be better if you did. So some of the health benefits are on the slide there, and I'm also just going to go over a few of the others. And there's new health benefits being found out all the time. Last week, just as I was getting this finished off, I looked on PubMed, published medical research papers on the internet. If you go there, that's where all the published research papers come up. And there are about 200 on the health benefits of forest bathing, published research papers now. So it's been shown to reduce heart rate, reduce blood pressure, lower cortisol levels, increase the killer cancer cells in the blood, lower anxiety, depression, give benefits to ADHD, and the comparisons have been made with just walking. So they have done control studies, walking in an urban environment, walking in the forest, and all the different parameters they can mess with. And it's the walking in the forest that makes the difference. There are a lot of places involved in the research now. As I mentioned, Dr. Ching Li in Japan, he started a forest therapy study group back in 2004. There's an institute in the UK, the Forest Bathing Institute, which is also involved in research. And here in Canada, it's very exciting. University of British Columbia has its own department, the Multidisciplinary Institute of Natural Therapies. And we actually had a webinar with them last week, and they are doing very interesting research into forest bathing and the effects on the health with all the different parameters messed with. And we as guys were very excited because they just published in a study which they just finished, walking in the forest without a forest therapy guide, walking with a forest therapy guide, with the guide was more beneficial and the health benefits were better. So we're like, yes, we can continue doing it. The University of British Columbia is also working with British Columbia to develop the first forest therapy base in Canada at Powell River in British Columbia. And I think they're starting work on it this year. There was an international conference this year in Stockholm, Sweden, with over 70 different speakers on forest bathing. And people have to ask me, how long do the benefits last for a walk? The walks that I was trained to take you on, which I'll talk about the association in a moment, we go for 3 hours. And it's been shown that that gives 30 days of benefit of health in the system. Or 20 minutes a day, that can maintain those health benefits. 20 minutes in the forest or with the trees can maintain those benefits. Heart rate has been shown to drop pretty much instantly as soon as you walk into the forest. Blood pressure, after about 20 minutes, has been shown to take a drop. So how does it do this? What's some of the science behind this? And like I said, there is a lot now. So I'll just go around some of these you can see on the screen. Biophilia hypothesis, where you may know E.O. Wilson, who is a biologist and ecologist and naturalist. This literally means the love of life, not the love of being alive, but the love of other life. And he said that humans have an innate urge to seek connections with nature and living beings. That need and desire is imprinted in our genetic makeup. Another theory as well to do with mental health improvements is attention restoration theory. Attention restoration theory says that mental fatigue and concentration can be improved by time spent in or looking at nature. And they did a ADHD study with children in Chicago. They took a group, took them off their ADHD medication, kept a group on ADHD medication, and took the group off the medication for walks in the forest. Compared them, and the walks in the forest did as much benefit for their ADHD as the medicine the other group was still on. So that's an interesting study as well. Mycobacterium vaccae in the soil has been shown to be very beneficial to mental health. This inhaling the smell of the soil can increase your serotonin levels and reducing anxiety. And they've even experimented with trying to extract some of this and use it as injectables to help people. Okay, I think they're still working on that. As you know, greenery in the hospitals has been promoted, and many hospitals now around the world have green areas and healing gardens. Groves, I believe, now has a healing garden, or they were working on a healing garden at Groves Medical. It's been shown that patients with Alzheimer's and dementia, the more greenery they're surrounded with, the less likely they will be to be hospitalized or need hospitalization. So that's just another little study on the side. Bird song. There's been lots of interest in this research on bird songs and the effect on mental health. And they actually, a study, I think it was in Europe, Germany, Scandinavia, I can't remember which, they could actually quantify it. It was a number of different birds you heard daily, and then for every extra bird you heard, they could say that's 5% more happiness reported by people. So they could even even go up by bird and say that's 5% more. People reporting 5% more from hearing a variety of birds. And I just looked at this before I came, actually, and there's even more on it now. So listening to birds, listening to tapes of birds, watching videos of birds, so that you can have a look at that as well. These are things which, a lot of this maybe, I started this 2 years ago, and a lot of it, the science sounded, that's a bit out there. It's a bit woo-woo. Not sure if I understand, I get that, and you may feel the same. And maybe a few of the ones at the bottom here I did a year ago, but now the research is there as well. You can find research papers on all of these things, looking at fractal patterns in nature, the repeatable patterns like in a fiddlehead fern, also has been shown to have positive health benefits, mental benefits, and grounding. And another one I wanted to add to here, didn't have time, is negative ions. Negative ions in the air, which you find in the forest and by waterfalls. Also, the research is coming out that they also have a health benefit. Now, phytoncides is the big one for forest bathing, because phytoncides are the natural essential oils that are being emitted by the trees. And there's actually some in the room today. Because as well as bringing this white spruce, I have some pure cedar essential oils, and I just put it on it here. So you may feel some of the cedar drifting across to where you are now. You're inhaling some of the phytoncides. And there's a whole slide on phytoncides next, because this is quite an interesting area. Just make sure I've covered everything on there. Yeah, I'm probably going faster than I rehearsed, but okay. So phytoncides were identified by a Russian biochemist in 1928, Dr. Tomkin, and they are the antimicrobial and insecticidal protection that the trees emit to protect themselves from fungus and disease. Again, this is where the bathing comes from, because although you can't see them, you are in them in the forest. If you can smell the scent of the plants or the trees while you're in the forest, there's phytoncides in the air. They've been shown they can be absorbed through the lungs and through the skin, and they are believed to be quite a big contributor to the health benefits. Cedars, spruces, pines emit the most phytoncides, so I've been doing my walks in town on the Aboyne Trail, right down by all those cedars there, because there's tons of cedars in there, so it's been a good site for that. And also out of deciduous trees, oak trees. Oak trees emit the most phytoncides. Dr. Ching Li was the first researcher, first major researcher of phytoncides. And like I said, in Canada, UBC is doing research. And there's machines, they have a machine that can measure the level of phytoncides in the air. So how would a walk work, forest bathing walk, if you came with me? There are a couple of associations that train guides, and that's coming up on a later slide. But the association I was trained with, the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, we usually do a 3-hour walk, and it follows a set pattern. So I'm just going to go over what sort of things you would expect on a 3-hour nature walk. I was going to say something else about ANFE. Never mind, it'll come to me later. So I start with just greetings and introduction, make people feel comfortable when they come to the trailhead. And then I go over a little bit of the history of forest bathing, Shinrin-yoku, just like I started this talk today. Then pretty much the first invitation we do is called the sensory opening, where we sit for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, just tune in with the senses, especially the senses we're not using as much as vision, to tune into the space you are and have a bit of mindfulness in the forest. And this sets the stage for the rest of the walk. During the rest of the walk, there are various invitations. They could be an invitation to communicate or meet a tree, sit with a tree for a moment. There's lots of different invitations we could do. And a sit spot is also a big part. So we'll find a nice spot where we sit, and really there's often no purpose or guidance to the sit spot. You sit for 15 or 20 minutes in the surround sound and screen of nature and enjoy the nature show wherever you are, and the weather, whatever the weather is as well. And then a walk will always finish with some social time, some teas and snacks. And there's also sharing throughout all of these invitations too. What are you feeling? How is it going for you? Blah, blah, blah. A couple of people, well, I know one in the audience came yesterday on my forest bathing walk. So Bridget over this side of the room, if she's willing to talk a little bit at the end, she said you can ask her questions. Okay, Bridget? There's Bridget there in the way. So she came yesterday, so she knows what it was all about. If you want to chat and ask her what it was like. In 3 hours, we move less than 1 kilometer. So it is slow. It is a lot of stopping, it's a lot of sitting, it's a lot of mindfulness, okay? So it's very different. Coming from a trail running background, I have a lot of trail running friends, hiking friends. I've taken foresters, I've taken wildlife photographers, and all of them pretty much say, oh, that was a very different experience of nature today than I'm used to. So it's something that you may not have experienced before if you've never done a forest bathing walk. And like I said, the guide now has been shown to make a difference, so we're pleased about that. We also emphasize that this is our ANFT standard quote. The forest is the therapist and the guide opens the door. We are not therapists, we are just guides. We're not even leaders, we're just guides to guide the people on their own experience where they come for a forest bathing walk. Just some walk photos from last winter. So this is just the social tea and snacks at the end of the walk. Actually got my 2 sons out there, bottom right. Managed to persuade them to come on the walk as well. So that was a success. And they stayed to the end. So how did I get into this, my journey? So I'll need a drink before this. My wife, Tammy, and you can see her if you observant, she's sitting right in the middle of this picture in the forest. My wife Tammy was diagnosed with breast cancer quite a few years ago, and she was not into the outdoors as much as me, but she got into meditation, healing meditation, when she was diagnosed and when she was sick and when she was doing chemotherapy. And one day out of the blue, she said, "Chris, can you take me to the forest? I want to sit and meditate in the forest." So she came up with this idea, independent of me, of any knowledge of anything about forest bathing. So yeah, sure, we went along. This is just near Silver Creek in Holton Hills, if you know that area. We went there a few times, and because she was sitting, I had to occupy myself. At first, I found I was a little antsy, you know, and I had to just explore and pick up sticks and things. But then eventually, I'd start to sit as well. which I haven't really done. Like I said, I've been running through the trails really fast. So I started to get used to the idea of just sitting in the forest and taking in everything that's around. So Tammy was a tree hugger before me, and I remember this day as well, actually, because we're at Willow Park Ecology Center in Georgetown, and she swore she could feel the electricity and the energy and the connection coming from that tree. So unfortunately, spiritually she healed, but physically she didn't. And then when she passed, I continued to go to the forest to help me in my grief. And so when I went on a run, I would stop halfway, sit, before I ran back. And then I would just go to the forest just to sit and meditate and think. So it's helped me over the few years. But then something kind of incredible happened to me. I'd never heard of Shinrin-yoku forest bathing, even though we met in Japan. We met in a bar in Japan, and I lived there at the end of the 1980s, start of the 90s, where Shinrin-yoku was being developed. But I found it online. I was just flicking through, and like, forest bathing, Shinrin-yoku from Japan. That's weird. Okay, this was after Tammy passed. I thought, I've got to find out more about this. So that led me on this pathway. I found out more about it. I found out there was organizations that actually train guides. I found out there's books published on it, which are also shooting out the roof, the number of books. There was probably Dr. Ching Lee's, 1 or 2 years ago you could buy. Now there are tons of books on forest bathing and magazine articles. We were told the other day that the recently magazine articles on forest bathing has skyrocketed on a graph like this. So there are 2 associations based in North America that train guides worldwide, and I mean worldwide. There's guides everywhere trained by these 2 associations in Singapore, Taiwan, the UK, North America, Chile, South America, everywhere. And between these 2 organizations, there are about 400 guides in Canada at the moment. We had to do an online course and then finish off with a 4-day immersion in wherever. I went to New Hampshire. I went to New Hampshire to do my immersion. And this is my graduating group in New Hampshire. We also did the training over Zoom in the forest, which was kind of interesting. They said they only switched to that during COVID, but it worked really well. So I was here in my Aboyne Trail. My instructors were in BC, and I had fellow cohort members from different places in the United States and Sweden, and we were all connected. We were all connected in our own forests, doing the training and doing the forest bathing. It worked quite well. What blew me away about this group of people, though, I mean, I was an educator, I retired. I went to this group, didn't know anybody, was the experience and the wide range of people at this group. There were educators, masters in education. There were head nurses in the medical field. There were mental health professionals. There were masters in social work. There were 2 professors from the States of psychology. There were master gardeners. And one of the professors of psychology, I want to give a special mention to, I'm not sure, he's got the beard at the back there. His name is Kirk Olson, and what he said really blew me away. So Kirk Olson has written a book called The Invisible Classroom. He's been involved in educational psychotherapy for 40 years. And he said, when he heard about forest bathing, he said, oh, that's great. That's another thing I can add to my practice, because he's been doing everything over those 40 years, trying everything, yoga, different mental health things, whatever, meditation, Zen Buddhism, blah, all his practice. So he said, oh, forest bathing, that sounds good. And he said, I'll try it as another thing to add to my practice. And then he said to us, when he was talking about how he got into it and why he's doing it, then I realized it wasn't another thing, it is the thing, is what he said. And that kind of blew us away, like, wow, this is a guy who really knows his mental health stuff, and he thinks all the other stuff, this is the thing really that he's been looking for. This also took me on a journey into, as well as training. 2 years ago, I could tell you a few trees, and I'm still not a naturalist, but I know more trees than I did. But this has taken me on a journey. I've read a lot of books and done a lot of research over the last 2 years. But it also took me on a pathway into my own heritage, which I never expected. I look back into my own Celtic heritage. Both my parents were Irish. I was born in England. And then some of the things I found there were like, wow, this is also kind of incredible. It's led me on this pathway. I did write a little short blog on this, so I'm just going to read it because it's changed a lot of information. So let's talk about, if you have Celtic roots, you'll find this particularly interesting. So I'll skip around all of these that are up on the board here. In Gaelic, the word for nature is all-encompassing, includes the natural world, the material world, and the human world, plus our own inner nature. They're all indivisible. Gaelic actually means the forest people. And I was like, what? I didn't know that. All trees were revered by the Celts, who believed that they held the souls of their ancestors, similar to Japanese beliefs. And this is partly why the next one, in the middle up top there, colonization by the English. Ireland used to be covered in 80% forest cover. When the English went to colonize Ireland, they needed the wood for their navy, but they also realized it was a big part of their spiritual beliefs because they believed the souls of their ancestors lives in the trees. So they thought, let's get rid of those trees then. So Ireland is the most deforested country in Europe. They reduced, the forest cover was reduced from 80% to 1%. And now I believe it's back out to about 12%. There's lots of tree planting programs in Ireland, but it's still only at 12%. I just think in my mind, if you've ever, well, you've seen pictures, have you ever been? Imagine in Ireland, that covered in trees would be just kind of unbelievable. Druid, the ancient Druids of the Celts, were also means the knower of trees, the word Druid, or more specifically, the knower of the oak tree. The oak tree is the most sacred of the Celtic trees. If you see the circular tree of life symbol, the Celtic symbol of life, that's supposed to be an oak tree in the Celtic tradition. And it was probably chosen as the sacred tree because it's the one most struck by lightning. So they probably thought, wow, that's quite incredible. It keeps getting struck by lightning. We'll choose that as our most spiritual tree, our magical tree. And then, as I just mentioned, now they find out it has the most essential oils for deciduous trees emitted. So I'm like, that's kind of interesting too in modern day. The Druids prescribed walks in the pine forest to ease respiratory illnesses. And in Celtic communities, people, and I apologize for my Gaelic pronunciation, if there's any Gaelic speakers, because I keep trying this word, mohia. So the mohia in the communities were people who could sense the sentience of the trees, and they were very valued members of the communities that could communicate with the inner spirit of the tree. The Celts also have their tree alphabet, the Oham alphabet. It's cut alphabet called the Oham. It's been around since the 4th century. Each letter is a tree, symbolized by a tree, and is named after a tree. And the Celtic year is divided into 13 parts based on trees. If your birthday is any time around now, because my son's is, so that's why I found this out. If your birthday is between 18th of March and April 14th, your tree is the alder. If you know what an alder tree is, that's your tree, your birth tree. Diana Beresford Kruger, you may know the name. She's written quite a few books, and she was a big effect on me. The things I've read and watched from Diana Beresford Kruger. She wrote I Speak for the Trees. She's made a documentary called The Call of the Forest, The Wisdom of the Trees, both of which I recommend if you haven't seen them. But she really interested me because she was from an Irish background, Celtic background. And she had a kind of a tragic start to life. She was, well, not straight away, when she was 12 years old. Her dad was very affluent Englishman, and her mum was from a less affluent Irish family. They met, fell in love, etc. And she would always they would spend every summer in Ireland. So she already went to a rural part of Ireland. She learned a lot about the traditional Irish culture. But then when she was 12 years old, her parents both died on the same day. Tragically, her father died, and her mum was driving back because the father had died and died in a car crash on the way back. So she lost both her parents, became an orphan on the same day. But at 12 years old, she still continued going to Ireland and spending more and more time in Ireland. And because the Irish, where she was in the rural part of Ireland, they still lived by the ancient Brehon laws, they adopted her in the community. She was their child, which was transformative in her life because they taught her everything they knew about the traditional cultures of Ireland, particularly the herbs and plant medicine. She learned so much about herbology and plant medicine, and she now is a biochemist a botanist, an organic chemist. She's qualified in all of it. So she had that traditional knowledge. And I have read that she is the last living person with the most knowledge of the ancient Irish ways. And she lives here in Canada. She lives near Ottawa, where she has a giant 200-acre property. And she collects seeds. It is a seed farm. She collects native trees from North America and tries to preserve them all on her 200-acre property, okay, to preserve them for future. Way back. I'd have to draw the slides. Yeah, okay, good. So, as I said, I met Tammy in Japan, and I found out about Shinrin Yoku from Japan. I'm like, whoa, I've got to go back to Japan then. So last year, I went back after almost 30 years. We'd never been back since we left. I went back last year because I wanted to visit some of the sites for forest bathing and then just see a couple of old friends who still live there. And I actually went back to the same bar where I met Tammy, and it was still open. And it was the same host running the bar as 30 years ago, which blew my mind. So that's good. That slide's good for now. So this map shows the forest therapy bases in Japan. So as you've kind of gathered, Japan is kind of way ahead on this, and so is South Korea, which we'll talk about in more detail later. So there are 62 forest therapy bases in Japan. And the two places I traveled to, Yakushima Island, is just off the south coast here, and then Akazawa National Forest was the birthplace of Shinrin Yoku. This is where Dr. Ching Li did his first research. This was the first forest therapy center in the world. So Yakushima is a really interesting island. This is very mountainous, but it's also tropical. And there's ancient cedars on Yakushima Island, which are 2,000 to 3,000 years old. They're called the yakusugi. Sugi is cedar in Japanese, yaku just for Yakushima, yakusugi. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It has a tropical coastline, a mountainous interior, and it's also a microcosm of Japan's biodiversity. It has, from north to south in Japan, it has representations of all the fauna that can be found on Yakushima Island. You can find bananas and alpine flowers, all on one island. It is very wet, which probably adds to the biodiversity. Locals say that it rains 35 days a month. I was very lucky because I got quite a few sunny shots, although it rained like crazy on my first day there. But most of the rain is in the mountains. The coastline is idyllic beaches. It's a little like Hawaii on first impression. There are some places in the mountains where it rains 8 meters a year, 8 meters of rainfall. So the next are just a few pictures of, so there's a little picture showing some banana trees and one of the lovely beaches. It should be just the bottom.
Oh, it's going backwards.
If you go to the bottom left, Kate, and then make sure it's on the.
Yeah, it's going backwards.
Don't know it's going backwards. Do you want me to come over?
Sorry.
I don't know. Well, if I go down here, there we go. Look. So as long as you click that, as long as you click. Oh, sorry. As long as you click that,
Got it.
then it's set for the space bar.
Sorry about that.
Okay. It's okay. Take another drink. It's amazing how dry your mouth gets when you're nervous. So we can go to the next one, Kate. Yeah, and then the next one. Excellent, thank you. So this shows some of the yakusugi trees. As you can see, this one is estimated to be 3,000 years old. And Yakushima is just, if you love moss and greenery and ferns, it's absolutely covered in moss and ferns, and you'll see in the next few pictures. This is what first attracted me. Again, I found it online. I saw pictures of it last year before I really heard it was a forest therapy base. I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. I want to go and see that. So, yeah, that's just showing the greenery again. That's one of the ancient cedars. Again, you can flip on. Unfortunately, I didn't go. You can go to the next one, Kate. Thanks. Unfortunately, I didn't go and see the oldest cedar tree because it was a 6-hour hike into the mountains, and I just didn't have the time for that. But that one is estimated to be 6,000 to 7,000 years old. It's called Jomonsugi, and it's right in the depths of Yakushima. Maybe another day I'll go back. Can you just go back one more, Kate? There's one with a very mossy, maybe one more? No, maybe one more? Or maybe, okay, it must be after the monkeys there. Okay, and the wildlife again as well there is awesome. So these are all on Yakushima Island. These are macaque monkeys, but they're called Yaku macaque. They have their own subspecies. And there's more monkeys on the island than humans. And there's also sika deer, and they all hang out together. Apparently, I didn't see this, sometimes the monkeys ride on the deer's back because they take the ticks off them, but I didn't get to witness that. There's also poisonous snakes and breeding loggerhead turtles as well, also on the island. Wasn't the season for them when I went though, so I didn't see any turtles either. And that's just another little pic. These are all my pics. These are ones not off the internet. Yeah, I was very happy with that one. And the next one too, Kate. So here's just an example of the moss cover again. The picture in the middle is the botanical gardens on Yakushima. The botanical gardens is completely, all the pathways are completely like this, just covered in moss. It's breathtaking. And there are 600 species of moss in the botanical gardens and 300 species of ferns. And it's quite a magical place to stroll around. If you leave it there, Kate, and then just press the space bar. Oh, okay. So like I said, I just had to go to the birthplace, Akasawa National Forest. It was a bit of a trek to get there, not walking, but by train and by buses, local buses, but eventually made it. And it is one of Japan's top 3 forests of outstanding beauty. So, and it is very, very beautiful. It was completely destroyed in World War II. So everything you see was regrown since World War II. It's the birthplace of forest bathing, first forest therapy base, the first research. And it's full of Hinoki cypress. These are Hinoki cypress trees. And the Hinoki cypress is very nostalgic to the Japanese because a lot of their houses and the wood making their houses is made of Hinoki. So every Japanese person recognizes the scent Hinoki, and it takes them right back to their childhood. Now, lots of the Hinoki trees die and then they're left as stumps, but lots of the new Hinokis grow on the stumps for the nutrients. So you'll find lots of, I took a lot of pictures of these interesting artistic looking stumps that look like humans hugging or lying down, and then you will find, I think it's a later, you'll find tiny little shoots of new Hinoki growing out of the tree. Now, I did have a guide who was very excited to guide me. So he was a Japanese forest therapy guide. He told me, I did find out there's 100,000 visitors go to the National Forest every year, but only about 8 foreigners. And I was a forest therapy guide. Once he found that out, he was very excited to guide me. But when he guided me, he wasn't very slow and mindful. I think he was just too excited. So he tried to take me on every trail that was in the park at a very fast speed. But it was really, really enjoyable and entertaining. And he also took me past the caution tape. He pushed the caution tape down. Come on, until his foot went through a boardwalk that was so rotten with moss, and he's like, okay, maybe we should go back. So it was a really interesting walk. And he would, because he's guided there for many years, he would go up to some of the Hinokis that he's taken pictures of each year and say, yeah, Chris, this sapling, 2 years old, there's a little sapling growing on the tree, a little Hinoki sapling. So he knew all the little tiny ones that were growing all over the forest.
Okay, it's very tricky.
There we go. So I think you can see some of the saplings growing on parts of this tree. That's just another example of one of the stumps that is there. Okay. It's all right. Gives me a chance to take a breather.
Right. A sip of water.
That's just another picture of this is a trail. That's the trail through the forest. Okay. So a few years ago, like I said, even a couple of years ago, you may not have been able to find much in healthcare about forest bathing, but now you can find it, a lot of it everywhere. It's recently becoming really more mainstream in the medical field. And some of the examples are on the screen there. There are hospital healing gardens in many hospitals and spinal recovery units in the UK. I'm not sure if all of them have them, but many have green gardens for spinal recovery patients. There's also an interesting program called Park Prescriptions, health program in many countries. South Korea and Japan, I think, are even way above that, but in the USA, New Zealand, and UK and Canada, the doctors can prescribe a prescription for nature. In Canada at the moment, it just gives you a free Canada Parks Discovery Pass. So you can go and visit the parks for free. But other countries have taken this further. I know that in the UK, decades ago, they had exercise by prescription. So you could go and get a prescription if you're recovering from a heart attack, go get a prescription, and that would, by the national health system, pay for you to go and have the fitness instruction by an instructor. I think that's the way it's going to go. I think benefits or healthcare programs will start to fund, for example, go with a guide. We'll pay that for you to go with a guide. It's going to do you better than medicine. In Japan, like I said, it's gone further. In Japan, there are medical professional mental health forest therapists, okay? So they are qualified psychologists, psychotherapists that just use forest bathing as in their practice. In BC, again, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a whole group of medical and social workers guided by a guide in BC, one of the head guides in BC, because they wanted to research and find out more, possibly putting it into their practices. So this is a little link. I don't think we need to go to the link. If you can go to Park's prescription on the website. You can see it tells you all about it. South Korea has a page of its own. Because South Korea, we can flick to the next one there. Okay. South Korea is in the position recently that Japan was in the 1980s. It's rapidly developed. People have moved into urban centers. Two-thirds of South Korea is forested, but 85% of the population now live in urban centers. And then because of this, they're having all the sort of health and social problems that Japan witnessed. South Korea has the lowest fertility rates in the world and the most plastic surgeries. Marriage rates sharply declining, and 1/3 of households are single people, and 90% of them report that they feel loneliness. But of the greatest concern, of all the most economically developed countries in the world, South Korea has the highest suicide rate. So in response, South Korea has gone into this in a big way. They are developing a green welfare state from the cradle to the grave. As part of their national plan, they've identified different stages of life, and they're trying to implement something to provide greenery in nature for those stages. At birth, prenatal classes can be done in the forest with meditation. There are children's forest playgrounds in all the healing forest centers, and there are forest kindergarten programs which are being created. Regular schools have a theme of education in the forest and are helping students understand the natural world and its creatures. There are digital detox programs in the forest and bully rehabilitation forests in nature as well. Bully rehabilitation programs in nature. Forest trails are readily accessible from all of those forest centers, and the government has a goal of training 500 forest therapy guides. South Korea is also the first country to offer a forest healing degree course. The government has built a $100 million National Forest Healing Center, and complete with addiction treatment, barefoot garden, herb garden, suspension bridge, 50 kilometers of trails. And in addition, in communities, a bit like the forest gardens that we have here, Green Gym is a project aimed to improve local green environments and bring communities together through light physical activities such as tree planting, pruning, and weed removal, kind of like this group. And then in death, there is a national tree burial forest where the ashes and remains of the body provide life to a seed that will grow and eventually become a new healing forest. That's just a quote I put up. Andy Goldsworthy is an environmentalist and nature sculptor. You may have seen some of his cool creations where he makes things in the forest out of tiny little stones or twigs and builds these beautiful, elaborate patterns and creations. So that's just something that I thought I'd put up. So as a summary, I do have a little video on my website, and this kind of summarizes a lot of the things I've just talked about. I chose Emerald Echoes as a name for my business. Emerald's a color of nature, an island, also symbolizes harmony and balance. And then Echoes, because it reminded me of my past and my return to nature, and I hope that would do that for other people. Reminder of memories and emotions and that might return to you as you return to your nature roots. And answers anyway, so I'll say, any questions? A couple of things I did miss out just before the questions. Thank you for allowing me to speak here. I think I went a little faster than I rehearsed it, but I got through everything. I did actually bring a pair of, I did buy some, I forgot to mention one thing when I talked about Yakushima. Logging was banned in Yakushima many years ago, but you can still get forest products made from the ancient cedars, because when they cut them down for the housing, they mostly made shingles out of the trees way back in the day, the house shingles. But then when they banned foresting, there were lots of wood just left lying around because it wasn't good enough quality for the house shingles. So the only thing they're allowed to make things out of now is that wood that lies around. It's called daimo boku. So the daimo boku is lying in the forest, but it's getting rarer and rarer, and it's getting deeper and deeper in the forest. But in Yakushima, some people, you can go and see some beautiful carvings, this big. I wish I had some pictures though, but I went into a shop and it was so overawed, I didn't take any pictures. Beautiful, intricate carvings made out of the daimo boku. I just have one pair of chopsticks. So the ancient Yakushima cedar, there's a pair of chopsticks there made from some of the ancient cedar. I think that wasn't too bad, just bringing one pair back. So if you have any questions, that's question time. And yes, I'll come out of that light. It was kind of bright.